In a time before time, there were three virtues: unity, duty, and destiny. Wherever evil stirs, there will always be a light to dispel it. This is the story of the Bionicle. A bit unexpected, isn't it? A Bionicle video coming from a tokusatsu channel. The two don't really have anything in common unless you want to count that we have a team of multicolored heroes. I love LEGO, and I love Bionicle even more. They were a huge part of my childhood that I'll never forget. I'll get more anecdotal as we continue, but for now, let me talk your ears off about one of my favorite franchises. In the 1990s, the LEGO group wanted to focus more on theming and storytelling. The idea that came from it was not Bionicle, but rather Slicers and Robo-Riders. They looked pretty awesome and were fun to build. Apparently other people thought the same thing, so these sets became popular enough for LEGO to try even harder. The next concept went under a few names: Bio Knights, Afterman, and infamously, Boneheads of Voodoo Island. Really glad they didn't stick with that. The concept was gonna last a while, so you could say it was gonna have a chronicle of stories untold. Our characters would be robotic, but biological. A bit bionic. Bionic Chronicle. Oh, Nick Nickel! And so, Bionicle was launched in 2001 in North America. Normally in these retrospective videos, I would give a detailed summary of the story from beginning to end, while giving my thoughts afterwards. I'm gonna have to change it up this time because if I talked about every single thing in Bionicle's lore, we would be here for hours. In a way, that's a pretty cool thing. No way anyone would expect so much from LEGO of all things. It was one of the many driving forces to boost Bionicle's popularity. The story we start with is a simple one, at least on the surface. The Bionicle are inhabitants of an island called Matanui, named after the Great Spirit. However, Matanui's brother, the Makuta, grew jealous and put Matanui into a long slumber. The days grew dark on the island, but there was hope in a legend that told of 6 heroes who would awaken Matanui. It's a little bit more in-depth than you would expect, especially coming from LEGO, but that's only the very basic plot. The entire background, world building, and lore is enormous. Apologies ahead of time if I go back and forth between what certain lore was added. There is a lot, so it's a bit difficult to keep track of when it was all first introduced and where. The world of Bionicle felt a bit more lived in by having its own written and spoken language. The main villagers of Matanui are called Matoran, their village elders are Turaga, and the heroes are Toa. By the visuals, you can probably tell that the theming of Bionicle, at least in Matanui, is more colonial and tropical, which is where the inspiration came from. However, the Maori people of New Zealand filed a lawsuit for LEGO's use of their words. Matoran were originally called Tohunga, and their character names had different spellings. Interestingly enough, there was an in-universe explanation for these name changes, as the Matoran have a holiday called Naming Day. The world building was what kept me interested in Bionicle as a kid, and it still does. There are stories of Matoran going through their daily lives, fighting off animals called Rahi, going on journeys to visit other tribes, a gathering of all the Turaga and Matoran in a coliseum for sport. Turaga are the elders of their villages, so they're usually very serious and wise, but some like Matau are pranksters and just want to have a good time. The Turaga of Matanui also have some pretty interesting backstories that we'll get into extensively. There's just so much to read, and the best part is that you absolutely did not have to read up on any of the lore. A lot of it was there for those who were interested, and if you just wanted to catch up on the main story, then that was always on the forefront of the year. Of course, there were books, comics, and video games, which also added to the lore somewhat. The games aren't canon for the most part, except for a couple that we'll get into in a bit. I'm gonna bring up that I'll only barely mention the comics and books since I never touched those. I kinda know the general stories, but I won't pretend like I know the details. Okay, so all that is fun, but let's not forget that Bionicle is still a toy release. The designs of these toys are like nothing you've ever seen before. They're almost like robotic aliens. One of the biggest gimmicks about Bionicle were the masks. Basically every single living thing had a mask attached to it, including the Rahi. 2001 had some strange designs, which I understand since it's a new IP. They're getting their footing within the world and experimenting. The sets released in 2001 were the Turaga, Toa, Rahi, and Matoran. I'm not gonna list every single one, or else again, we'd be here for hours. Right off the bat, the Turaga were something I couldn't begin to imagine being designed. Their bodies had this strange angle to them, their feet pieces came from the pieces intended for heads, and their tool or weapon even looked a little different than you'd expect. Turaga Matau, the green one, has a saw, but that's not any kind of saw I've ever seen. I wouldn't say the designs of 2001 are too out there, but they are very creative. The Matoran especially are I don't even know. These simple ones are only like 8 pieces, but there's a story behind the way they look. When we get to the Rahi, well, they're just as creative, but now with even more pieces. This one is a Nui Jaga. It's a scorpion and I think it looks sick. Terrakava are lizards? With boxing gloves and treads instead of feet? What? Come on, tell me that's not imaginative. Before we get to the main 2001 story, there's some background on the Matoran Rahi War in the lead up to the Toa's arrivals. The main threat of the Bionicle universe is the Brotherhood of Makuta, a species of shadow dwellers that were in charge of creating Rahi. However, the original leader of the Brotherhood was overthrown by one Makuta named Pterodax. I know it might sound confusing with all the name drops, but it'll be more confusing down the line. So Pterodax infected the Rahi to be able and terrorize the island of Matanui, where the Matoran Rahi War began. 3 big players of the war were Jala, spelled Jaller but pronounced Jala, Onepu, and Kongu. Jala is the most important one as he is the captain of the guards for his Wahi, or Providence, called Takoro. During this time, one of Jala's friends, named Takua, is out on his own adventure. He's a chronicler and a wanderer who wants to become a hero. However, that wasn't seen as the Bionicle way. The universe lived by 3 virtues: unity, duty, and destiny. Takua was seen as a free spirit, so his peers kinda shunned him. Despite that, his own journey had him rescue each village Taraga and find Toa stones. Once he found them all, he discovered an open canister on a beach, along with tracks he's never seen before. This adventure can actually be played with the GBA game Tale of the Tohunga, though as I quickly mentioned, the Tohunga name had to be changed so the title later became Quest for the Toa. When I was younger, my parents knew how much I loved LEGO, especially Bionicle, so they surprised me with both GBA games. As a side tangent, the other GBA game is called Matoran Adventure. It's glitchy, levels overstay their welcome, and it's kinda lazy as new characters and enemies are just recolors. But dang it, I'm so nostalgic for it that I don't mind the minor rage as I try to beat Tawahi for the 5th time. If you're interested in any of the games, I wouldn't recommend Matoran Adventures. There isn't a story either, so really you're not missing anything. Tale of the Tohunga, however, I think is average for a modern player. It's still buggy and the story is almost non-existent too, but the clay-like art style is pretty neat. Plus, traveling through Matanui and seeing recognizable landmarks was surreal. I wouldn't say Bionicle games are generally good, and trust me, it hurts to say that as a Bionicle superfan. Although there are 2 particular games that I can fully say are worth checking out. I'll get to the other later. Remember when I mentioned Takua arriving on a beach with an open canister? This next game starts immediately from there. The Toa have arrived on Matanui, so Takua goes on another quest which gets him involved with more Wahis, more discernible characters, and of course, meeting the Toa. Matanui Online game is a point-and-click adventure game, which might already be a turnoff to some. This type of game style was a lot bigger in the early 2000s, so the audience isn't as enjoying of it as they are today, but it's actually pretty good. The story alone should be enough for you to keep playing, if you're into Bionicle of course. It's one of those games where I highly encourage you to go on a blind playthrough. It might be tough since after all it's an old school point and click adventure, so it's just as cryptic as you expect it to be. However, it's very rewarding seeing those cutscenes in action and watching the story unfold through the eyes of Takua. Well, there are also walkthroughs on YouTube, but hey, check it out through that too. Some of the most spotlighted builds in each set are, of course, the Toa themselves. They're who the story usually focuses on, a team of 6 heroes fighting against the Makuta and his threats. While I think the overall designs are interesting, I don't think they're anywhere near the top. Pohatu, Toa of Earth, has a pretty cool mask and his torso piece is inverted so his function would be at his legs. Kopaka, Toa of Ice, is my only other real favorite since he has a sword and shield. I like Lua, Toa of Air, just because he's green and has an axe. Jeez, I'm still talking about 2001. I didn't intend for this to be a long video, only going over each year briefly, but here we are. In fact, I kinda intended this video to be like 10-15 minutes. Please keep in mind that all the story I ever bring up is only surface level. As much as I want to, I'm not gonna get too deep or else we're gonna be here forever. Normally I wouldn't recommend going to wikis, but the Bionicle wiki is actually pretty good. It has all the information you ever need, plus more than not even I knew about. I thought that Toa Mata just showed up one day on Matanui, but there is more on where they came from and what training they had before setting foot on that island. The story spans hundreds of thousands of years in universe, so again, I won't get to everything, but there are plenty of resources to get lost in. Fun fact, when I was looking for pics of the Matsunui Turaga, I went on the wiki just for references, but then I spent hours just looking at article after article. And don't worry, sources are cited so you won't get people saying, this is a reference to something completely unrelated, unlike some wikis, but I digress. I only started getting into Bionicle at the tail end of 2001, barely when the new toys were being released. Although I do remember seeing Toa Lua in a couple of the Rahi in stores. Remember KB Toys? Those are the days. Anyway, I don't have any personal preference of these sets until we get to 2002. It felt like the LEGO company was only experimenting in 2001, so 2002 pretty much went with, if it ain't broke, add on to it. A new threat has awoken on the island, the Borak. Our Toa Mata team were barely able to fend off the Borak Queens, who had some pretty sick designs, when the Toa ended up in a pool of Protodermis. However, they weren't killed, only reborn into something better, the Toa Nuva. Right off the bat, wow, that's an upgrade. The Toa Mata seemed almost naked with their design, so the Toa Nuva were given armor and new masks. Silver for the armor pieces makes them stand out and look almost futuristic. As a kid, my first real introduction to Bionicle was when my dad bought me Toa Tahu Nuva out of nowhere. I was ecstatic because I knew it was from LEGO and I fell in love with the design. My favorite color is green, so I automatically have biases towards green heroes like Lua, but he's also the Toa of Air and I love going on airplanes or in hot air balloons. Ironic as I'm scared of heights. But all of that together made Lua my favorite of the team. Others like Pohatu and Anua just looked powerful, while Kopaka and Gali looked wise and capable. Previous masks were a bit simple in design, mostly being rounded, but the 2002 masks had etchings, jagged edges, unique mouth sculpts. They were overall strange, and I liked that. The villain of the year were the Borak, which were accompanied by these Turaga looking ones called Borak Va. They're adorable, but not much to comment on. Oh, this one has little swords, aww. Borak traveled in swarms, and they looked a little terrifying. Look at this promotional material, it's awesome, yet you know they're a threat. The Toa Nuva had very different designs, but the Borak were simple in contrast. Their main function was that you could push their heads and turn them into balls. That was fun. Just like the Va, I don't have much else to say other than they have some neat designs. I know that didn't seem much for 2002, especially compared to 01, and that's because it wasn't. Once again, if it ain't broke, rebuild the sets into something better. Overall, the year wasn't bad and felt like it was laying groundwork for something more. The Borak Queens were defeated, but they had a plan in case they fell. Enter the Borak Kal, 6 unique Borak made to revive their queens. Imagine a regular Borak, but with silver platings instead of clear ones. Gala Kal was my favorite, only because promotional material showed it with the stone that I thought came with the toy. That was one of the few times I felt disappointed as a child. One interesting thing about Bionicle 2003 is that it was split into 2 stories. The first half of the year was with the Toa Nuva versus the Borak Kal. Then the story shifted to my favorite saga in the entirety of Bionicle, the Mask of Light. On one of his expeditions, Takua stumbled upon a relic that housed a Kanoia Voki, the Mask of Light. Takua and Jala were tasked to search for its owner, who would become the 7th Toa. Meanwhile, Makuta Pterodax awakened 6 Rakshi to stop them. And yeah, they look sick too. By the end of the journey, Takua decided to put on the mask himself and become Takanuva, Toa of Light. He faced Makuta in a sports game to the death and opened a door to awaken Matanui from its slumber. So now I can finally talk more extensively about the further backstories. In the beginning of the universe, the Great Spirit created a planet called Spherus Magna. It broke off into other moons and planets, where one became Aqua Magna. One of the Great Spirits, Matanui, became infected by the Brotherhood of Makuta and crashed onto Aqua Magna, resulting into what became known as the Great Cataclysm. Matanui fell into a deep sleep, so it camouflaged into an island also called Matanui. Don't get too confused, remember that there's the Great Spirit Matanui and the island Matanui. Same name, different things. The main goal was to awaken Great Spirit Matanui from its sleep, which was a duty almost fulfilled by Takanuva. Before I explain what was on the other side of the door, I gotta get into the other media. Matanui Online Game 2. I praised the original a lot, so this should be a big deal. And it was. Then the game got released. Matanui Online 1 was in first person and already had some interesting story before the game even began. MNOG 2 was third person. Alright, that's a nice change. We'd be able to see more of the beautiful surroundings. We played as Holly. Actually, I have no idea. Apparently she was an assistant. Alright then. Let me be honest, I just think MNOG 2 is boring and didn't bother to finish. Apparently not too many people are fond of it either, so I don't feel as bad now. Give it a shot if you like the first one, I guess, but I'd move on to something else. The other game was cleverly titled Bionicle the Game. Man, now this is what I have the most memories of. At that point, my parents knew I was obsessed with Bionicles and gaming, so they were aware of just how badly I wanted that game. Ultimately, they said if I didn't argue with my sister for 1 week, then they'll see about getting it. Martel, if you're watching this, get off my channel, and sorry for arguing with you so much. They did end up buying the game for me and I beat it the same night. Then I beat it again, and again, and again. Dang it guys, I love Bionicle. Too bad the actual game itself isn't all that great. I'm surprised it's on a console at all. It took this long and it still looks like a previous generation game. The controls don't feel responsive and have input lag. Matanui is supposed to be beautiful, but the game makes it look gray and unappealing. Those models are gross. And yet, my nostalgia is blinding me so much that I'll get past all that and enjoy anyway. Story-wise, it very loosely follows the Toamata saga to the Mask of Light saga. And I mean very loosely. No Borak Queen fight, no Matoran storylines to follow, you fight a couple of Borak and that's it. The Mask of Light saga comes down to this.
The mask I found was the Mask of Light. The Turaga sent me on a quest to find the 7th Toa.
7th Toa?
A Toa of Light. Only the 7th Toa can wear the mask.
And where is the 7th Toa?
I don't know.
Hope you enjoyed that. How's the gameplay? It's a light 3D platformer with janky controls, so it's kinda unfair. The combat has you shoot beams of light like Link at full health, and all you gotta do is reach the end of the level. Toa are powerful beings with their masks giving them unique abilities. Pohatu is supposed to be fast, so he's given an on-rails level? Lua can fly, but only for a couple seconds apparently, and only in certain parts of his level. At least Gali can swim. Currently, I'd say I was disappointed by the game, but as a kid, I didn't care. It was Bionicle, and it was on GameCube. They also did my boy Lua dirty by scrapping his Toamatsu stage. You might be wondering when I'm gonna bring up the movie. Well, I'm hoping to give the movies each their own full-on review someday, but that's for later. I'll just say now that I was excited for Mask of Light as much as I was for the game. Luckily, the movie is of much higher quality, though only if you're a Bionicle fan. This isn't the only film in the franchise, but let me be clear that the movies are very abridged retellings of certain sagas. Well, I like them. Oh look, the Toa are T-posing. So what was behind the door that Takanuva opened? Secrets that led to a land once forgotten. An island known as Metru.
Hey everybody, I'm White Fang, and let's face it, Bionicle got a pretty good overall story and pretty great construction sets overall with the cool little functions like the gears, and then of course the Lego pieces, those were pretty damn cool themselves. Honestly, that doesn't mean jack unless you got a killer advertising campaign. Now, what do I mean? You remember this guy?
Bionicle Special Edition.
New giants from Bionicle. New Telemari from Bionicle. New from Bionicle.
After all these years, I still remember that voice. Hell, it's one of the few things I can still remember from when I was really little. Something else that always sticks was those little animations showcasing what the Toa can do when they're in their own environments. And then, of course, when it cuts to the scenes of, like, the physical, like, construction sets themselves, the Toa, or the Rakshi, or the Borak, and they're like, showing off their little gear functions or features or posability or brand new pieces for this year. I really can't remember my birthday parties when I was young, like when I was 2 years old. But for some damn reason, I can still remember that image of the Toa Nuva in the black room with the glowing white fog circling around them at the end of the commercial. I remember those commercials for the Mask of Light movie playing on my DVD player in front of my like little Disney DVDs and whatnot. And I still remember the promotional material, like the blind bag Kanohi mask, you know, for the infected Kanohi or extra Krana, or the stuff, whatever launched out of the Borak, because the name escapes me. And of course, I still remember Manog. Any huge Bionicle fan remembers Manog from 2001. The main idea for this advertising campaign is that it's meant to be effective and stick with you so that you keep on like thinking about it after. Like, you know, you want the toy, you want the toy, you want the toy, right? Now, everyone also talks about the story, which is a huge aspect of Bionicle, right? People call it Warhammer for kids sometimes, although I'm not too sure about that. However, the main point is that story was meant to attract you to the sets, which would then lead you to buy the sets, which would then lead you to want to either act out scenes or create your own little side stories within in-universe, or create like even like, I don't know, like whole tribes and whatnot. And that's something we call the mock community, my own creation, where people would make their own Bionicles out of the pre-existing pieces and whatnot. Now, very few commercials made me want to physically crawl into the TV set to have those Lego sets. You know, just like crawling in like the Ring. I say that they were meant to be effective. Now, were they actually effective? Well, I mean, you tell me. Does single-handedly bringing Lego out of near bankruptcy sound effective to you? Hopefully, in part 2, Marcos will also talk about how they used music associated with like little mini movies or commercials, such as Move Along by All American Rejects, and of course, Cryoshell. Marcos, please, for the love of God, talk about Cryoshells Closer to the Truth in part 2.
In 2004, we didn't get a continuation of Matsunui's story, but a prequel. It starts thousands of years ago with the last living Toa named Likan, an evil plant called the Morbuzak. Okay, so I feel like I pronounced the names as closely as I could. I know I said Lua instead of Liwa, but I prefer Lua. Although Morbuzak was the one I was dreading the most. Morbuzak? Morbuzak. I'm gonna say Morbuzak. An evil plant called the Morbuzak was causing Matoran to disappear, so Likan created 6 Toa stones and gave them to certain Matorans for them to become the Toa Metru. Remember the Turaga from Matsunui? Well, now their own story is told. Turaga Vakama was once Toa Vakama. Together, he and his team stopped the Morbuzak with the help of 6 Matorans, and presented themselves to Turaga Duma, who did not believe they were Toa. After some events, the team found that the missing Matoran were kept in sleeping pods, and that Turaga Duma was Makuta Pterodax in disguise. The Toa Metru sealed Pterodax and Protodermis and took the Matoran to a far-off island. However, their mission wasn't over, as there were still many more Matoran to retrieve from Metru Nui. A game called Maze of Shadows has some story on what happened on the team's way back to retrieve the other Matoran. I never played it, so I don't have any opinion. The art looks nice though. Metru Nui is more of a technological-based island, especially compared to Matsunui. Life is based entirely on the Metru Nui technology, whether it's transport chutes, aircrafts, futuristic astrological towers. It's all so pretty. Made even prettier with how it looks in the movie, Legends of Metru Nui. Again, I'll go over the movies a later time, but this is one of my favorite in the main trilogy. The landscapes really are gorgeous and just as imaginative as I'd expect this world to be. With a more advanced theme in 2004, you can see that the Toa themselves are sleek but fit in the Bionicle aesthetic. I think Nuju is going to have to be my favorite of this set. The mask just looks so cool and his giant ice picks look awesome. Onua has another cool looking mask, and Matau is Matau. The mooks of the year were the Vaki. They kinda reminded me of the Rakshi from 2003, but the Vaki looked a bit more menacing. At first they wandered around Metru Nui, acting as patrolling guards, but little did anyone know that their true intention were to kidnap Matoran. This ad where Vakama saves a Matoran and more Vaki appears just so cool to me. I think the Vaki are one of my favorite builds. They were simple enough to put together and still have a neat design, especially with those heads and weapons. Although I didn't really like the Matoran for that year. The front side looks fine enough, but the backs have a lot of empty space which rubs me the wrong way, and the appendages were always loose, but maybe that's just me. The titans of the set are probably at the top for me within the franchise. Toa Likan has my favorite design and is my favorite Toa ever. Although ironic because I never got a Toa Likan toy, I just think he's super awesome. The 2 Dark Hunters, Kreka and Hidiki, have these awesome looking bionic designs to them, and Ultimate Duma is just... I don't even know, man. Metru Nui has a lot of lore and background to it even before the Great Cataclysm. If you really want to get lost, then look up just one article on Metru Nui and go down the rabbit hole. Mask of Light might be my favorite saga, but 2004 is my second favorite year for Bionicle. The island alone is so creative and the builds are wonderful, along with having some of my favorite designs. The Toa Metru saved some Matoran after they sealed Makuta, but they had to go back to save the rest. 2005 told that story. On the arrival back to Metru Nui, the Toa Metru noticed how run down it's become. Buildings are crushed and covered in webs from the mooks of the year, the spider-like Vizorak. Their leaders are Sidorak and Rudaka, 2 very cool looking builds, and we finally got a major female villain. The Toa Metru get captured by Rudaka, who then uses hordika venom on them. With a new year comes a new look. The Toa Metru become the Toa Hordika. They're beast-like creatures that still say Toa. Hordika, Vakama, and Nokama are especially pretty cool. The asymmetrical design, the hunchbacked and legs, those weapons, the heads, I really like the Hordika, even if they're not my favorite or even top 5. The Vizrak, on the other hand, man, so simple but so vicious. The main function is that you can push down its body for the pincers to snap. That's fun. One thing I haven't been bringing up is that each year has a gimmick. We had Krana, small soft masks that fit inside Borak, Krata, serpents that don't really go with anything aside from Rakshi, Kanoka discs, which were fun to collect, and now we have spinners. Yeah, definitely not as cool as the gimmicks prior, but they were fun to play with for at least 2 more minutes than usual. I mean, really, the only collectability spinners had were different colorings. Our mini builds of the year came in the form of the Rahaga. They look kinda like Turaga, but were mutated into the beasts we see now. The Rahaga were once a team of Toa until Rudaka transformed them like she did the Toa Metru. A couple of the Toa Haga team were released that year and they looked awesome. I wish we had their full team because Aruni and Norik had awesome designs, especially with their colors. Isn't it weird how despite being under LEGO, Bionicle didn't really have any true LEGO playsets? We finally got them in 2005, and they were okay. There's a reason why we don't see them too often. I certainly didn't like how the minifigs were one single colored piece of plastic, but building the sets were fun. I got the Tower of Toa for Christmas and I built it, then never touched it again. Yeah, I was more into the construction sets than the traditional LEGO builds. The story of the year ends off in a final battle against Rudaka, but ultimately, the Toa were forced to unseal Makuta Pterodax from the Protodermis in order to save the other Matoran. There were a few details like Vakama becoming evil for like 5 minutes. Fun fact, the original intent was to have Mattel betray the team, but since Vakama is the leader, LEGO wanted him to get the spotlight. So anyway, the Toa Hordika revert to the Toa Metru with the help of Kitangu, an intelligent Rahi, and they get the rest of the Matoran across the ocean and onto Matanui. Although, Vakama was given a vision of a new Toa telling him that a team must be sent to a dark place soon. 2005 wasn't the best year, and I was more interested in the story. Metru Nui is already an interesting place, so seeing it run down just makes it that much more intriguing to explore. You know, like exploring an abandoned building and discovering a secret that you shouldn't have. I have this vivid memory of getting really excited to see the Vizrak in my local Walmart shelves. I'm sorry to anyone who saw me embarrass myself as a kid. So now that we ended 2005, I'll call this a good halfway point to stop. Oh boy, let's get into my final thoughts for 2001 to 2005. My goodness. Bionicle has so much to tell, and I've only touched the surface level story. 2001 was a powerful start for a new IP, and the years following only built upon what made the builds great in the first place. You wouldn't find anything else like the Toa Hordika or Rakshi in any other toy franchise, and that sentiment might even be true today. I grew up with Bionicle near the start, but my personal favorite sagas are just about to begin. With all that being said, I'll see you guys next time when we join a new team as they journey to a new island, along with seeing the dark depths of the ocean, then battling at the core of the universe, and finally being sent to an unknown showdown between Matanui and Makuta, along with the near reset of the Bionicle universe as we know it. All this and more with Bionicle 2006 through Generation 2.